I am your host, Matt Sprague. We have a special, not only episode, but a series of episodes ahead of you. As you can see here alongside me, I have four distinguished gentlemen with me. And we are going to explore really a kind of a topic from three different perspectives and vantage points. So we're gonna talk about a topic about data availability from the perspective of the assets life cycle. So we're gonna look at the operation and maintenance. So what does data availability mean in that portion of an asset life cycle? In the build phase, as well as obviously the planning and design phase as well. I got them a little bit out of order there, but that's what these four gentlemen are here to help me with today, is to put everything right. So before we get going on the topic at hand, I want to, we'll kind of go around the horn a little bit and make introductions. So instead of me introducing everybody, I'm gonna kind of go around and please, to the attendees, to our listeners, introduce yourself, where you're from, and how you kind of came up through in the industry, how you got to where you are today. So I'll start with Joe McHugh.
Sure. Thanks, Matt, and hello, everyone. My name is Joe McHugh. I'm a GIS manager at the Chicago Department of Aviation, which manages both O'Hare and Midway International Airports. My background is actually in GIS. I studied that in college. I went on to be a GIS technician and analyst at Peoples Gas, which is the natural gas utility company in Chicago. Worked there for about 6 years, doing as-built data entry and data analysis on the gas system. Now I'm at O'Hare, trying to apply a lot of those kinds of things for, the infrastructure at an airport, which is kind of like a city unto itself. Thank you. Happy to be here.
Thanks, Joe. All right, I'll kick it over to Aaron Ford.
Thanks. Aaron Ford. I am the PMCM Enterprise Digital Innovation Manager at H&TB, and been with H&TB for a little over 14 years now. Worked very closely with Joe and Zach. Have had the opportunity to work with MMSD and Rick as well in the past. Came up as actually a GIS application developer, working with several state engineering companies within Wisconsin, where I live, and developing geospatial applications to solve state and local municipal challenges to be able to take data that was traditionally relegated to kind of county clerks and requiring people to come into buildings and facilities, and now being able to access that over a web browser to look at parcel property information, et cetera. So have kind of extended that over the years, and now help to manage program management, construction management, and enterprise systems deployments for various transportation agencies.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining us, Aaron. Zach Lewis, I'll pass it over to you.
Yeah, sure. Zach Lewis. I currently work for the Connect Chicago Alliance, which is a program manager arm for the OD21 program at O'Hare Airport. Work closely with both Aaron Ford and Joe McHugh. Prior to that, I'm a civil engineer by education. Started my career in construction management, delivering various types of projects, which has then eventually evolved into interest in building information modeling, trade coordination, and dabbled a little bit into asset management, but also moved into prefabrication and looking for progressive ways of delivering components ahead of time on projects. And then at the Connect Chicago Alliance on the ORD21 program, responsible for digital delivery and establishing CAD BIM standards and paving the way for long-term asset management systems.
Awesome. Thank you. And last but not least, Rick, it's just the way it showed up on my screen here. We got Rick Niederstadt.
No worries. Thanks, Matt. So yeah, Rick Niederstadt from the Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewage District. I've been in the industry for about 25 years. I'm currently the capital program support manager for MMSD, but I really cut my teeth in the world of construction management. So I'm a civil and environmental engineer by school, and I guess a jack of all trades, master of none by life experience. After construction management, basically moved up in the organization, doing a variety of different things. But I'm presently in charge of our capital improvement program, which includes our project controls group, our geospatial services and solutions group, which does obviously a lot of GIS and CAD and BIM related activities, as well as our construction management and survey teams. So as a capital program owner with a couple of significant water reclamation facilities and a private operating agreement for those facilities, we certainly have some interesting and unique needs relative to data availability and data accessibility, across the whole life cycle of an asset. And it's been really interesting to see those different perspectives from all those stakeholders, depending on what stage of life an asset happens to be in.
Fantastic. Now we got to know all of you. We're gonna dig into this. So, like I mentioned at the beginning of the show, this is going to be a multiple part series. We at the Connected Construction Show, we don't want to put on like a 1 hour podcast. So we're going to kind of break this down into consumable pieces, and there was great synergy in terms of the asset life cycle, and as the asset life cycle pertains to the overarching topic of data availability. So before we step into the first portion of this, can we and open this up to anybody who wants to answer it? All four of you can answer it if you want. At a very high level, what are we talking about here? What is data availability?
Yeah, I'm going to kick off with that one, Matt, because I think, especially from my perspective, depending on where you're at in a particular organization, it means something else, depending on your perspective, right? If you're in the world of operations and maintenance, clearly you want data that's available that helps your job from the perspective of O&M. If you're designing or planning a project, that's a little bit different. If you're constructing a project, it's also a little bit different. If you take any particular piece of equipment or asset or building or whatever you want to call it, right? Maybe there's 50 pieces of data that are of some relevance to any of those stakeholders, right? But maybe if you're on the O&M side, you're particularly interested in 15 of those pieces, and design and planning, maybe a different 15, and so on and so forth. But I think what's critically important is that across that spectrum of stakeholders, there's maybe 15 or 20% of that data that's applicable to all of them, right? There's nuances and there's minutia that's specific to each particular stakeholder type, but there's some data commonality, and in my world, it's those common data pieces that we really want to make sure that we can give everybody access to, so that they can efficiently then dive deeper and get the more intricate details of what they're after.
Yeah, that's great, Rick. And when I think of data, I think about accuracy and consistency of the data, and how we can transform that data into information, so that the folks that are viewing that and for their respective purposes have confidence in the decisions they're making based on that data, and that it's presented to them in a way that helps tell that story that's relevant to them. Looking at granular pieces of data, as I often look at it, can be challenging. So leveraging the right tools and mechanisms to transform that data into information, to then allow individuals to process it, turn that into knowledge, and to make sure that the proper standards, specifications are in place for how that data is captured, how it's maintained, and then the appropriate audience that information is ultimately relayed to, so that we have control around the data and the information, and we have proper measures in place for those that are viewing it, using it, and know the proper levels and length that they can take that extrapolation to. And SUE level is a great example, and I know Zach and Joe can talk to this. We want to make sure that we have the proper guide rails or guardrails around the data. Certain information we still want to show, but if we can put a lower level SU confidence around it, maybe we don't make as critical a decision around that particular asset or feature until we've gone out and done additional investigation on it. Versus one that may have a higher confidence, we can perhaps make more design level decisions off of it without having to go out and necessarily put the same level of rigor in to verify its location and accuracy. So it's a wide ranging capability, but I think having the data there to at least know that an asset exists is better than not, and then putting that scale there as to the type of decisions that can get made off of it is equally important.
So what I'm kind of hearing from both of you, and it's really kind of the reason why we designed this series the way it is that the data can be different, doesn't have to be, can be different in every single phase. The challenges are different in order to get that data in every single phase, and then the challenges are. Well, maybe the challenges are the same in terms of organizing the data, because I know I've had experiences with organizations. I have a friend. I live in New Hampshire. I have a friend who works for Department of Transportation up here in the Northeast, and he just basically said we've got a lot of data. Nobody knows how to get it, and nobody knows where it is, and that's the problem. And I saw some chuckles. Am I encapsulating this correctly?
Yeah, I think in a nutshell, you got it, right? I mean, there is a lot of data, huge amounts of data, depending on where you're at, and making it useful and making it available is the challenge of our current era, I think.
Yeah, I'd agree. And not all data is necessarily good data or information that's worth maintaining and keeping up. So we really have to listen to our stakeholders and what are the stories they want to be able to tell with the data, and what's the required data to be able to tell those stories. So I think that's a critical answer. We need to have the end in mind. We also need to understand that we don't need to achieve that end tomorrow. But we do need to start working incrementally to reach that final destination, whatever that may be, in terms of stories and knowledge we want to be able to pull out of this data. We go to conferences all the time, right? And we hear all these success stories, and we see kind of that 3, 4, 5 year journey that an agency has gone on. And a lot of times, folks want to get there tomorrow, right? But they don't know how to necessarily apply that story to their own agency, to their own assets. And often a lot of that legwork and trials and tribulation that went into that great presentation that you see at a conference is hard to relay. And it starts with having a clear understanding of who your project champions are. What is it that we want to ultimately accomplish, but how can we start at that first step with a particular project? Right, we don't need to tackle all assets. Maybe we focus on a particular asset type that's of particular importance. We have a lot of, water main, breaks in the wintertime because of old utilities. Maybe we focus on water. Maybe we start looking at age of utilities and the like, or certain types of material or cathodic testing, that hasn't been maintained. So starting small is, I think, a really important step in that journey. But having that end in mind. So, we've kind of talked in the past, everyone sees BIM too, right? And they see digital twin and they have that kind of on the front of their minds, but we don't need to have full LOD up front in our, preliminary design stages. We can start small, but we need to start with a model first approach so that each stage, as you noted, Matt, builds upon itself so that ultimately when we get to the end of a construction project, it is designed and been built in such a way that it feeds into an asset management system. We don't have to transcribe or pull data from a myriad of different sources. It's all been properly thought through and organized in a way that supports that end.
Cool. All right. So we've got the overarching kind of ideas about data availability, and now I want to kind of double click down in terms of from the perspective of, and we're going to start with operations and maintenance. So from that perspective, like, what are the biggest challenges to maintaining reliable asset data and information? Joe or Zach, you guys got somewhere to go with that? Joe, it looks like you're at bated breath.
Yeah, I'll kick us off with that subject, right? So I'm on the owner's side, right? I work for the Chicago Department of Aviation. It's a department of the city of Chicago. So my colleagues, at CDA are the ones that are taking care of the assets once they're designed and construction and put into service. And there are many challenges, right? It's a matter of arming people with tools, I think, to capture information so that things don't stay in, their minds or their memories. That's sort of, I think, a common historical practice, because there weren't a lot of tools of the trade that would allow people to do this. So, things were left up to individuals' memories, or they would jot things down on notes or paper tickets or work order tickets on paper, and the papers would be filed away in a filing cabinet. And that information became difficult to access over time. So, what we're talking about, I think, here are assets and infrastructure components that have really long lifetimes that sometimes span beyond individuals' careers in a particular field, right? So we're talking about, whether it's pipelines, roads, buildings, things that are going to be around for likely decades, and throughout the duration of their service, there could be any number of people that are performing inspections or maintenance or repairs on those assets. And the difficulty, I think, is in arming people with a consistent approach and tools to capture information throughout the life cycle of the asset. So if it starts, say an asset was installed in the 1950s prior to, modern computer technology, there was a process at that time that needs to somehow live on and be captured and evolve with technology, such that knowledge is not lost to time. And certainly we want to prevent scenarios where, an individual was a subject matter expert in a particular type of asset or performing certain kinds of O&M or repair activities on something and not documenting those activities, but they have a great picturesque memory. But that memory, only works for that one particular individual and whomever may have come into contact with them. And that's not really a long-term sustainable approach to capturing what went on, what activities went on with that particular piece of equipment or infrastructure. So the challenge really is, like I said, building some consistency and processes of capturing information and allowing that process to evolve with technology over time, such that we don't lose knowledge or lose information from the past. We need to be able to capture that information and carry it on into, the new exciting technology that, a lot of us here on this call are really excited about, but, may not have been around, or there may not have been really any interest in that decades ago.
Joe, it's interesting. You just said a word that kind of triggered me a little bit, right? Is in a good way. Is the evolving, right? So and I think it's important. Evolving's it never stops, right? So like what we have in our mind and what we're going to talk about today and in the series are about like pieces of that data availability evolution, asset management evolution. But we there's going to be bigger and better things as well. I hope there's bigger and better things as we continue to evolve and whatnot. So I don't know. It set me off there for a second. So thank you for bringing that up.
Certainly. Yeah. And I think, my colleagues made great comments a few minutes ago about reliability and trust of information and data, right? Like, why are we capturing data if it's not trustworthy, or the end user has no, ability to make a decision based on that data, right? And so that same logic applies to data or information captured decades ago before computer systems. all of this stuff needs to be kind of merged together into what we know of as the truth about, infrastructure and how to take care of it. So the past really needs to help inform that, trust and reliability of the data.
I think about, there's always the intersection of people, process, and technology. And, what I think has seen the biggest growth in the, probably last 10, 20 years is, the technology has gotten so much better. The challenge really, I think everyone on this call is understanding the people and the processes that exist. And I think, data essentially left alone is devolved into chaos just by its very nature. And again, it has to do with the changing of guard as certain staff move in and out of programs, and then also the systems that are implemented, whether they're prevailing or legacy systems, at the time. It's a constant upkeep, I think, is what we're discovering, and setting a baseline standardization is not really a one and done type of thing. I think to Joe's point, taking that, digitizing a asset installed in the 1950s in the year 2022, doesn't establish it, necessarily long term, throughout the rest of, in perpetuity, right? There's kind of an ever evolving baseline that needs to be established. And what's also, I think, been interesting with, the evolution of technology is, looking at, and I come from the, design and construction world, but, the evolution of how design was developed, from, large hand-drawn blueprints to, the early stages of mainframe computing and CAD drafting, and now into building information modeling. And I think the biggest change from that whole process is, the rate at which data can be created, which isn't necessarily a good or a bad thing. It's just simply the velocity of information that can be generated. And the challenge has essentially become is information and data can now be generated at such a high velocity that you run the risk of essentially wasting time or generating bad data or too much data. Whereas I think, historically, the level of effort to actually generate information via blueprint, to hand draw, to sit down and do it, there was a lot more of a conscious decision in how am I going to actually create this and make it worthwhile. And the minimalist approach to creating, succinct pieces of information, was just by virtue of the process. Nowadays, I think it's almost the opposite, right? Where, we can create, tables upon tables and just databases full of information just with a click of a button. And really the effort or the conscious effort needs to be is, really pruning down what is exactly valuable, and matters, and can be shipped off from one system to the next.
So I think it was, oh, sorry, go ahead, Rick.
Yeah, thanks. So Joe and Zach said a couple of things that, really made me think, depending on your perspective in the world of an life cycle of an asset, and perhaps, as we're talking about operation and maintenance, right? Technology is great, data is great. We're all on this podcast because we all love it, right? And that's not a universal truth. All right. So I think one of the cautionary tales here is that, we have to be careful when we see new technology and the benefits that can provide across an organization or an entity, that we have to not tell people, hey, you need to collect this data because we need it. It really needs to come from the perspective of, we have this tool available that can make your job and your life easier. You can do things more effectively and more efficiently. And oh, by the way, it also helps inform lots of other stakeholders that have interest in this particular asset, right? I think there's a lot of people that are frightened. You say data and a switch turns off. They're like, oh God, they're going to start talking about technology again. Right. And it's, to them, it's not data, right? To them, it's information they need to do their job. And I think we have to be really careful to translate that in a fashion where, all stakeholders of a particular entity can feel what that system or software or technology is able to do from the perspective of making their life easier, their life better, and everybody else's along the way.
Yeah, that's a great point, Rick. And, it makes me think through just the changing times that we're going to start to see here in earnest as, we see more capital projects funded, more dollars start to come in, and the complexity of the jobs that are let requiring a significant amount of workforce that, quite frankly, doesn't exist today. And we're going to need to both look at how we can leverage technology to work more efficiently and effectively with the staff that we have, but we need to be mindful of, you're right, how we train and communicate this to those staff to get their buy-in. But as new individuals are coming out of colleges and universities, they're leveraging these tools, right, Zach? They're not leveraging, punch cards and mainframes anymore, hopefully not, but they're going to be expecting to leverage and work with inside this new common operating language and model that we're talking about today, and that paradigm has really shifted from drafting tables with ashtrays in them to actual AR, VR, LiDAR-based data collection efforts, and the new way that we collect and manage that vast trove of data and information that's being produced, Zach. So I think we need to be mindful of it from both our current workforce, and I think training and proper communication, to Rick's point, really talking to the value for the user and what's in it for them on their terms, but also making sure that we're setting up agencies to bring in and attract the best and brightest, right? So that we have those minds there to deliver on these looming, complex, and I think really fantastic projects that are going to be coming up here in the future.
So in an effort to kind of put a bow on this section, I'm going to kind of look at this again from the operation and maintenance respect. So I'm going to ask kind of Zach, Rick, and Joe, and Aaron from your perspective with customers that you work with. But within your organizations, what is the current situation with data availability with operations and maintenance? So like, what are the challenges? Are there particular challenges that you're facing, and do you have plans to address them?
Yeah, I think at least in my world, certainly we have challenges. Especially with a private operations and maintenance contract. Making sure that we have access to the types of information that they are our operators collecting on the O&M side, and making that available to the other parts of the organization is a challenge, and it's one we're working on. We are certainly not in the place yet where we want to be, but hopefully in the not too distant future we will have a CMMS, computerized maintenance and management system, that really allows us, to look across an asset system and see relevant information from the O&M side that's populated by our private contractor, and having that available quickly and efficiently for people that are perhaps planning and designing a rehabilitation of that asset, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah. From our perspective, we're, I would say, in a pretty similar situation as Rick just described. At both airports, really, O'Hare and Midway, we are trying to stand up an enterprise asset management system. We're in the planning stages of that currently. Without it, our kind of facilities and operations divisions, not always, but they tend to work kind of independently or in silos from each other, and are a bit old-fashioned when it comes to how they share or interpret information from each other. There's a lot of, phone calls and emails being made that could have been documented in some kind of, long-term enterprise-wide system following consistent processes of information gathering that would help inform people, years down the line of the activities that were taking place. So that's been, I think, our big struggle, is the sort of different unique teams and their subject matter expertise and individual processes and procedures that don't always align with each other, or don't have, kind of easy cross points with each other where they can share that information. So, I've witnessed that there's been kind of double or triplicate work that's taking place because, maybe, a person in a different division was not aware of some activities that had taken place. So, they redo them or they engage a contractor to redo them on our behalf. So there's, some efficiencies that I think really need to be gained here by thinking more enterprise-wide and trying to standardize some practices across the organization here.
I'll echo Joe's sentiment. There's several anecdotes that come to mind, but it's I think getting a central perhaps a single source of truth, but to get some sort of central way that information can be made available, is potentially a solution. But currently, right, is there are a lot of stakeholders that really have their preferred tool, preferred method, preferred source of truth, and we're at the stage right now from my standpoint is the solution that I think we're all working towards isn't quite there yet. That I'm at a level comfortable to say, yeah, you can put that old tool down. What we've got now is absolutely better, and because it's understanding what those tools are, and that could be information stored in a legacy system. It could be an old as-built that may be incorrect, but it's been handwritten, modified to the point that it is the true source, or it is at least usable for that specific group. So I think working towards again some sort of enterprise level approach that does take into consideration the needs of all the different subject matter groups is what we're working towards, and I think we've had a much clearer vision than we have had even 12 months ago as to what that's going to look like.
Yeah, and when we're talking about that single source of truth and an enterprise approach, we also need to balance against the reality of existing infrastructure, dating back from the 50s and 60s, as well as new projects that are getting let and coming online. So while we might have a single end in mind and a single source of truth, we want that data to flow in. We need to kind of consider the different types of data that we're ultimately wanting to get into that system before O&M can even begin. And maybe rather than taking a one-size-fits-all approach, we're going to do a before our solution approach, and if it's below ground, maybe that's different SUE levels and confidence intervals that are in place. If it's above ground, maybe we have some type of a LiDAR data collect exercise and an AI that extracts the assets for us and loads them into that solution. Versus new construction that's going on, we have specific specifications and standards in place that help to transition that information directly into some type of an enterprise asset management system to help directly support O&M, so there's no transcription or risk on the owner's part to do that. But really starting and finding where your most areas of opportunity. We don't want to necessarily move the cheese on somebody, but if it's going to provide a lot of organizational value, reduce risk, maybe that's an area to focus on first. And then to slowly incrementally expand into that larger enterprise implementation to where you can manage truly all of your assets and features, both legacy and ongoing, through that system. But to take it one step at a time and to look at the different asset types accordingly.
Well, this has been awesome, guys. So believe it or not, we are at the end of the first part of this series. So everybody who's tuned in and watching this, thank you so much. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. And the great news is we're just scratching the surface here. So next week, come back again and listen to us as we take the same concept of data availability, the same topic, and then we're gonna pivot into away from operations and maintenance into the planning and design. So, what does data availability mean to the planning and design phase of an asset lifecycle?